Welcome to the Keeping IT Real podcast. This podcast features honest and transparent conversations about what it takes to manage corporate technology and expenses today. Each episode, listen to true and personal stories from IT professionals who are working hard to make sure their business stays connected and competitive. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo, and let's meet our next guest. Today, I am joined by Aaron Rezepka, the Senior Director of IT Service Delivery for the NFL. Aaron has over 25 years of experience delivering enterprise-class IT services, allowing prominent global brands to scale. As a sports fan, I'm definitely excited to have him on today. So Aaron, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So to everyone listening, Aaron and I had a off-recording conversation about the NFL and what that's like, and obviously we'll be able to color that conversation in the main conversation today. But let's start the way all good stories start from the beginning. How did you get started in the world of IT? And with that story, kind of talk about how you wound up in the world of IT in football.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great question. So I was fortunate. My father actually was in IT in late 70s, early 80s. So I really grew up into, I guess, what some people would call a family business of being associated to technology. Now, of course, when you're 7 years old, the best part of IT is video games. And so, I got to learn about all these video games in the mid 80s. And that's pretty much when IBM had their very early onset of user computers. And so I started learning to build computers when I was about 12 years old. Most people don't have that advantage. Luckily, my father was one of those people who was building, OS2 Warp and all these original kind of operating systems, as well as scalability for computers a long time ago. And I always loved the idea of building things. And putting them together. So I really started with, hardware and learning how all the different components within a computer work. And at the time, technology was moving so fast that, we were adapting where everything used to be on its own, piece of hardware, like, a network card and so on, versus now everything's integrated and the motherboard. And so it's a lot easier. But I always found it fascinating and just building things from when I was 12 years old. And then, slowly I progressed to develop a career within technology. Actually starting my first real IT job as doing user support and dial-up support for Sega.
Oh,
which was super exciting when you're 16, 17 years old, is working for a game company, doing help desk and internet support for the first gaming console to have dial-up and connect to the internet, which at the time was, 56K modem, and the connection was kind of terrible, but the Dreamcast was a fascinating product. And then, doing troubleshooting and learning about the technology for that. From there, I really just progressed through a career of technology, and then was fortunate enough to land a job where I get to be a part of football and help design technology for putting football on the field, but also for our users and enabling them to be able to make the magic of football happen.
what is it like being on the inside rather than just the outside? And then what is it like being on the inside in the role that you're in, being on the technology side, especially with how technology has advanced and has become a crucial part of how we enjoy the game nowadays? Kind of talk about that.
Sure. I mean, one of the best parts about being in technology with the NFL is really the access to cutting edge technology. When you work at a bank or somewhere else, they may not cycle through technology as quickly and need cutting edge, systems to things. And so one of the coolest parts about being at the NFL is really the innovation and bringing fans something that they can really be excited about. And so, when we really think about technology, it's really, building technology sets to either enhance the sport of football, or building technology to better enable our workforce to be able to produce football or be involved in football, or, creating a mechanisms for fans to be able to be closer to this.
And you're a part of that IT team as a whole. What does your day-to-day look like? How do you sort of contribute to the greater technological, part of the NFL?
Well, I'd love to say that everything I do is an enhancement of the sport and the game of football that you see on television. But there's a lot of back office pieces to make a game happen. And so, when we look at building, the Super Bowl or, international games or any of these non-standard kind of events, we have to build all different technology and stand up all different technology and plan for that. Planning for our Super Bowl happens year plus in advance, from site decisions all the way to technology planning and stadium planning. Beyond that, we actually have corporate offices. We have a television studio. We have all these different facets that require technology on a day-to-day. And so I spend quite a bit of time with strategic planning, team management, operational oversight of different kind of areas, and our goal kind of reviews our IT strategy and aligning with our organizational goals throughout the year, building, strategic roadmaps for technology every year and making sure that we're continuously growing the technology organization to meet the business needs. And so as, sexy as it is to say that we're a part of football, we are also doing corporate, America work at the same time. The NFL is just as much a business as a lawyer's office or somewhere else, that this whole back end has to be done, whether it's finance apps or, other day-to-day business apps and things that need to be built and designed that we have in the background. And so, my group is also in charge of doing a lot of back office business application development and things that are not necessarily seen directly on television, but things that support people that do the things on TV.
I'm deviating a little bit and then we'll go right back in. They say that if you work at a fast food restaurant, you never eat at that fast food restaurant again. If you work at Disney, you solidify your love for Disney. Where does working for the NFL fall in one of those two camps? Do you enjoy football more or less because you're a part of working for the NFL? I don't even know if that's an accurate question to ask, but.
No, I think it is. It's funny, is I've heard that too before. They use Mattel as an example. Do you play with the toys that you work there? And the concept is, NFL is a consumer product that is, loved by so many different people. It's enthralling to be a part of it. And so, there's so many passionate moments that I've had being a part of the NFL. For example, at the end of the Munich game 2 years ago, when the fans were all singing John Denver, being able to share that moment with them and to be there and watch that is enthralling. NFL as a product is so captivating. It's one of those things that changes consistently. You can be rooting for your team one day who's on top of the world, and then in the second, they no longer are number one team. And then, developing that relationship with the product is, very family oriented. People, become very passionate about one team. And I have some coworkers who, pass that down to their children, just like it was passed down to them from their parents. They just love those teams. Now, being a part of the NFL, we're not allowed to have favoritism to any club or anything like that. Instead, we are a fan of the sport, and we want to see it grow and really bloom into this new reality of a global sport across the world.
So you're part of the NFL club as a whole, if you will. And you've talked about how, just like any product, right? The NFL is growing and evolving and adapting. What kind of are you looking forward to when it comes to that cutting edge technology? What are you most excited about when it comes to IT and tech? And what are you most concerned about maybe too?
Yeah. So, I think that myself and many other leaders in IT are really, excited about the adoption and introduction of AI technology sets within the world. And at the same time, we're very also concerned with AI adoption and technology sets, from a security as well as, are we inviting too much into our environment? And so, I love the idea of finding AI use cases for different office functions that we may have or front office functions, but then trying to align those with business needs as well as security. It's one of my biggest fears too. And so, we have not yet had a scenario where we're adopting a specific type of AI within our environment, but is something that I do see on our horizon where we're researching these and looking for best case use case scenarios, but then also making sure that we're safe, secure, and ensuring our environment is protected.
On that note, how do you approach balancing the need for innovation with also maintaining stability and security within your IT infrastructure? How do you not lose one or the other too much?
Yeah, it's a great question because, really innovation and security are kind of hand in hand now. With the amount of threats there are to being a secure environment, and, bad actors are very intelligent folks that are really trying to drive into different organizations, and being, a very public brand, we have to be very secure and safe about how we introduce new innovation. And so, we have to do a lot of proof of concepts, making sure that things are safe, and identify, all the different mechanisms to really introduce new innovation. And so, we have to align our new innovation with business goals and needs, and make sure that there's a reason to do that, not just to be innovative, but that we're aligning with the business to make something new and incredible happen. But at the same time, we're working with security to ensure that, not just that we can do something, but should we, right? And so that, we've made sure that security is aware and that they're introducing the best practices within security and making sure that we're compliant, and everything is done in a controlled environment up until we release something in production.
Yeah. I like how you said that innovation and security are kind of hand in hand instead of in opposition to one another. I like that idea of looking at it. You talked a lot about, how much you love IT and tech, and you started from a young age, and you built hardware, and then you built your career, and now you're building Super Bowls. It's a lot of building. But I like to talk about I think a good story doesn't just have the good, but it has that struggle, right? So what are kind of the biggest challenges that you're facing in your role right now, and how are you choosing to tackle it?
Yeah, I think that, really one of the biggest challenges we have is AI, because everybody sees it as an opportunity. I mean, there's so many different things that we see as opportunities that can associate and attach to AI. All these big software brands are preaching about how we want to induct and introduce AI into your environment. It will save you time doing X, Y, Z. And one of the biggest challenges is finding, an AI solution that is secure, safe, and cost effective, to where we get the right ROI on that investment. And it hasn't been an easy journey to find that and to introduce something like that into the league at this point.
Yeah. I mean, AI in general is really interesting for any business, but especially for a business that's so big, a product that's so big, a product that is people facing, people involved in it, trying to figure out how to use technology the right way, and AI especially the right way, when so many moving parts are involved, I imagine can be a little interesting. You are the Senior Director of IT Service Delivery. What is IT Service Delivery? What do you do? And what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm responsible for all different areas within our technology stack. Now, one of the ways to classify different pieces of IT is, a lot of IT is delivered as a service. So, when we do back office application development, that's a service that we're delivering to the consumer. In this case, the consumer is the front office, and the business is requiring this application development. Another area that I'm responsible for is all user assets. So IT assets across the league. And so, all of those assets, we deliver that as a service, as well as the support services for those assets. And so, service delivery is really an encompassing of IT products we're delivering to business as a service. And those products can range from, AV and collaboration spaces. It can be user support and user services. It will be IT assets like laptops, desktops, and so on. It could be enterprise application development. All of those areas happen to tree under me. But there's other areas that I used to manage that used to be considered an IT service, and they still are. They're just not under my area anymore, like our NOC and data centers, system administration. Those are areas that I used to maintain and manage, and they moved to one of my peers when I took over application development. And so the concept is that service is really showing that any IT that we're delivering is delivered as a service to our user community.
Gotcha. I appreciate the clarification, because when you first started talking about it, I was like, well, so then you're just the director of everything, because everything IT related seems to be a service to me. Is there a scenario, or are there things that aren't service oriented when it comes to IT that I'm just not, I could think about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I look at it as, our infrastructure team, they're delivering, network gear that's not really a service, right? Because it's Now the Wi-Fi they deliver is a service, but the hardware they're installing and those kind of components they're managing is not a service. There's cloud products that they manage that nobody, particularly knows that they're using, like cloud products. They're not really delivering that as a service. And it might not be going to the user base. Instead, they might be delivering that to another technology team. And then that technology team is providing something back to the users. So it is a layered aspect. So, I'm service oriented to our consumers, which is the business and our user base. Whereas somebody who is doing, building our data centers right now, that's not really delivered back as a service.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
The consumer of that is not user base side. It's really other IT groups are using that. And so it just depends. Now every organization is different. So, there may be lots of IT organizations that don't have a service delivery manager. Instead, they just have an IT man. End user support may not be considered a service. We consider it a service.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how you.
Yeah, exactly. Because that could be like, well, they're doing a service to just to not your user base, but to you guys, it could still be a service, but it's how you define service delivery and who you're servicing. Yeah.
Yeah. What I will say is that, a lot of service delivery also has multiple relationships where it's not all internal. So there's a lot of service delivery that has a lot of vendor relationships that you bring in, and you maintain and manage the vendor that's delivering the actual service.
Yeah.
And so your service management and service delivery of that service based on an MSP or other things that you have brought in. It just depends on the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Talk about a successful IT project that you've worked on in the past, something that you're kind of proud of to sort of implement, do, and what were the results of that project?
Yeah, we did a project for an automation task to kind of automate the onboarding and offboarding process for users. And this was a multi-faceted collaboration between several different departments, including HR, finance, IT, a few different areas within the organization beyond that. And what that entails is that when a new user starts, our HR team puts in the request for the new user to start. And then we have all these automation tasks that onboard that user. And so it provides them an email address, provides them group membership to different distribution lists and so on. And so all of that automatically kind of happens. Whereas before somebody would get a ticket in our service desk to build all these manual things. And so instead we created this automation that creates and onboards this user. And the onboarding wasn't even the most important part. It's very helpful and it saves us a lot of time, and I'm really glad it's there. But the offboarding ends up being even more important. And the reason being is we are able to disconnect software licensing and all these different attached administrative accounts and everything else automatically deprovisions when a user is offboarded. And it's also triggered from HR separating an individual. And so really we streamlined this process, had a lot of chances for error. Because when it's all manual, you can miss any of these steps, and that creates risk in your environment. It also can create additional costs. If you have a product like Adobe that costs $6,000 to $1,000 per user license, having that automatically removed and having that license covered immediately saves you quite a bit of money. And so that project to me was very key. When we go through the process of onboarding, 500 people for when we're in season to 1,000 people when we're in season, instead of having, 10 or 15 service desk agents create all these accounts that takes, days and days and days to do, it's automatic. And so we have a mechanism to trigger all these accounts to create, and they're already in all the right groups, already have all the memberships they need. And so we're, able to safely distribute out those accounts, based on our security compliance process. And so that way, these users are created and it's in a very timely fashion. So we saved lots of time, lots of people hours that are spending doing that activity. But also the best part for me is our margin of error is, completely gone. So it's now structured, it's automatic. And like I said, and when they offboard, it's just as nice because they immediately all offboard. Everything is reclaimed. And so we don't have any financial risk as well as risk of somebody still having access to something past their time when they're supposed to be delayed. So super excited, super happy that we were able to put that together. It was great. All the teams that I collaborated with, had some amazing help from our HR team, all of our technical teams that were, involved, and as well as a few other departments that really helped key in. And it really is fantastic process across the.
I think that's it's something that in my organization we talk about a lot, is that importance of having that visibility and making sure that you know what you're spending on where, and if people are leaving, to not just have wasted software licenses or wasted devices, to make sure that we reclaim that, right? And so often people are having hundreds of phones in their back closet that they're still paying for, and they have no idea because they haven't offboarded it properly. And then a new person comes in, instead of using one of those, they buy a new phone, and then they offboard, and that phone's wasted. And so having this, you're having this database set up where it's like, we know what is being paid for, and when they leave, we know that we don't have to pay for that anymore. And that's huge, right? I mean, it saves money, and it saves time, and it saves resources.
It's really key. And now with the way that security is, it's so important from a security perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a huge success because, the reclamation of assets is so important. And that's not just hardware, software, and like I said, administrative access and all these different licensing that they may have, or access, and making sure that we shut that off immediately. It's just key.
I talked to this podcast, I had quite a number of guests, and that reclamation of assets, the making sure that what you have is sort of not a high priority item. It's important, but they're like, we have more important things to do because resources are so tight and they don't have a lot of resources in general. So they're like, I want to have full visibility. I want to automate, but I'm just trying to stay alive and keep afloat. How have you guys prioritized IT initiatives within your organization to work efficiently and productively with limited resources?
Well, I mean, we really have to prioritize based on stakeholder decisions. So, you have to build out a roadmap, and that roadmap has to be realistic of what is achievable. And then when we look at, what can be done, we have to prioritize where is it the value maximized. So if it's an initiative that is strictly for IT, that would be internal. We have to value whether is that more or less important than an initiative from the business that requires us to produce something. And timing is very important. So, if we're preparing for our season, because we have seasonal business that happens versus, year round, where we're not in season with the NFL, we have different priorities during the off season versus the, being in season. And so we have to build out that roadmap to really align with what the business requires at that individual time and, grow with the business. Not only that, we have to set realistic expectations with our, consumers. And in this case, that's the stakeholders in the business of, people running the league. And so we just have to be very transparent on what we can accomplish. But they're also very transparent with us, which, this is something that we have to have. This is something that was nice to have, and make realistic goals of timelines for when we can complete it.
So it requires, your stakeholders to know what they want, but it also requires you guys to know what your capacity is and what you can do. And then it requires sort of a shifting around if priorities do shift. Requires a lot of knowledge and communication, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you really, like I said, you align with the business goals, and then you have to assess impact and value, right? And then you need stakeholder input on those, goals as well as the impact and value. And then, from there, we target our resource availability, and we try to build out a roadmap of where those resources will be available to do those exact tasks. And then at the same time, we need a risk assessment to understand, how important is X over Y, and, which one needs to be done, first. Evaluating those risks helps us identify the critical projects, right? And so we understand where we want to move forward, versus what can be held for 2 months. And then, we do this other on the side. Now, there's always the debate between, quick wins versus long-term investment. So you have to really pull in okay, well, this we could do in 2 days. So we should just knock this out, right? And the way we can put that down as a win. Whereas this is something that's going to take us 6 to 9 months. So, where do we start that? And so when we get those projects, we have to identify, okay, well, how do we assign these resources? Can we have one person do a long-term project and then have this other person do the short-term? Or do we need to couple up here and try to reduce the length here and make it faster? But that's really kind of how I break it down.
I think that's an awesome way to break that. When it comes to, we're talking about prioritization and strategy and then actually executing. When is your you mentioned, you're like, oh, we plan our Super Bowls. We build our Super Bowls a year in advance plus. When do you plan? When do you execute? How do you balance all of that as a team?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been in, before I was in with the NFL, there's always about business planning and designing how you're going to do a roadmap for your environment. Before I was with the NFL, we would do, a like 6-month plan, 1-year plan, and a 3-year plan. But being with the NFL, I've learned that, we actually plan out 5 years in advance. And look, your plan in year 4 may not be what it is when you get to year 4. Things change, but for us, it's very important to forecast as far out in advance as possible. We have so many moving parts, from different scale events to office technologies to, expanding different areas of things that need to grow within the league, that we have to plan a 5-year roadmap. And so when we look at that, we have our, kind of the 30, 60, 90, which is what you're executing on. You're delivering in 30, 60, and 90 kind of increments throughout the year. And that keeps rotating in and out. And so what we do is, we have to use that agile methodology and really kind of, whiteboard it out to where you're like, all right, over the next 30 days, these are the things that we're able to action on and complete, right? And over the 60 days, these are items that are dependent on the things that were prior or they're new, right? And so we have to start setting out those milestones and those deliverables and really break it down. So that way we're able to accomplish things in a timely fashion. I'd love to say that we have as big of an IT organization as like Google, but we do not. We're an organization that brings football to fans around the world, not necessarily one that brings all technology like Google or Amazon. So, we're a relatively smaller IT team. And so we really have to be strategic on what we action on, what we execute, and then also very clear and realistic about our goals to make sure that leadership understands that this is what can be completed at this time, and then move on to the next item and so on.
You make it sound so, I don't want to say easy because it actually doesn't sound that easy, but how did you, how'd you learn all of this? You know what I mean? Like what were those big learning lessons throughout to understand how to prioritize, how to balance, how to look at everything and know exactly what to do?
Yeah. Resource management is one of those things that you kind of fall in love with as you're going through IT in general. I mean, it's just all throughout all IT professionals' careers, they have to learn resource management. 25 years ago, when you were in IT, you're just in IT. Now there's a million specializations within IT. And so, you have to decide which one of those things you're going to really dive into. And that's where your background kind of starts growing. But even once you specialize, whether you're, a cloud engineer or a network, person, or somebody who works in the NOC or somebody who's on the service desk, you still have to understand that job has expanded so much that it requires that specialization, that you have to understand, okay, now I need to figure out within my resource pool how I can maintain and manage this technology stack on a day-to-day basis. And, I'd love to say that everybody's job is very structured in IT and that your day is the same every day, but it's not. I'm sure everybody that you talk to, their day-to-day changes based on IT need. And the IT need changes every day. And it's not just the internal technology that needs to change. You're dealing with all these external factors. And so, when we talked about risks earlier, when I talked about AI, that's a huge external factor. It's going to change how I prioritize my time and resources to understand that technology set and where it could impact my day to day. So, to really your point about resource management, resource allocation, is you really have to dive into that and be very good about planning, resourcing. And that's not just people. It could be your own time, because, I might have a staff of 10 or 15 people, but other IT individuals are the only IT person for their organization. And they have to figure out, okay, well, how am I spending my time today? And what amount of my time as a resource am I going to dedicate to this intentional project? And so, we all have to really figure that out. And it's really critical, I think, for any IT person's success to be able to manage resources, including their own time.
Yeah. Moving forward, right? Your 30, 60, 90, whatever your plans are. What are your biggest priorities or challenges, and how do they support the business? How are you aligning with the business now and in the near future?
So, as a part of aligning with the business, I mean, we meet with them frequently. Our goal within my organization is really to streamline IT processes and enhance service delivery, across the league. And we want to do that through automation and providing better user support, the ultimate goal for us is to improve efficiency and our employee satisfaction and driving productivity across the league. And so when we look at ways to accomplish that, we have to meet with all different facets of the business to understand how we can better support them within IT. And we want to take that burden away from them where they have to figure out, like, if I had this technology or that technology, could I do my job better? Instead, we want to be innovative and present them a technology set. Hey, have you seen this? And then get them to be a part of our proof of concept where they're like, oh, this is amazing. I want this. Right. And so instead, we're working with them hand in hand to ensure that IT is aligned with the business, also that we're aligned with the future state of where the business is going. And it's very critical for us too, to be a part of their internal business meetings too, on the business side, to understand the direction that group's going into. So that way we can forecast technology to help them move to that direction. And so you really have to have that collaboration with the business side as well as other groups within IT to make sure that we're able to enable them to do, these new things and that we're able to deliver. My goal overall would be ultimately, obviously, to reduce downtime and create efficiency for somebody to not require assistance from IT, but to be able to function at work. And so they don't have to worry about, having any issues or software not working or, if they had this versus that, they could do their job faster. Instead, I want to enable them with those tools so they're able to make, the magic happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's a final question to close. And it's I would say your soapbox moment, but this whole thing has been a soapbox moment, but soapbox moment of the soapbox. What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned over your career that you'd like to impart on the audience right now?
It's funny as when I think of that question, I really think about what are some of the things that were really important to me? And so first is, learning from your failures is super important, and to make sure that those don't, kind of ruin the environment for you. Instead, you have to take a failure as a learning lesson and be able to figure out, how do I, improve on this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Instead, you use it as a lessons learned in a way to really build yourself back up into, okay, well, I see how this failure happened and I analyzed it. And so I know that I can find a way to continuously improve myself to be able to fix this moving forward. Another concept with the way that technology is moving, I think that everybody needs to really embrace change. If we get stagnant as technology professionals, it really will set us back, because technology, the landscape is consistently always evolving. And you really want to be a part of that change and leading that change versus being somebody who digs into the way that things work today and become kind of a hindrance, because technology is going to change one way or the other, whether you want to be a part of it or not. And instead, if you embrace it, it will actually allow you to really leverage new opportunities and to stay ahead of change. Another item that's really important for me is really investing in the people that work for you and around you. I have so many great colleagues that work on my team or with my team or peers of mine that, these folks have really enabled my career as well as their own, and really make the environment fun, exciting. They're experts in their field, and, really investing in them is what really helps bring our environment to be as great as it is. And then the last thing I have is probably making sure that everybody really stays curious. It's really important to really be interested and be fascinated by technology, and to really be what's going to happen next. And when something does happen, to be really intrigued by it and try to be I need to figure out how this works, because that's kind of what drove a lot of us to being in IT, is they want to figure out how something works.
I think that is a perfect way to end. You start with building and you end with building and figuring out how things work. So Aaron, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. This was personally a really fun conversation, as someone who's a sports fan.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, and take care. And I wish you all the best, and go whatever your favorite team is. No favoritism though. So go NFL. Thank you so much again. We hope you enjoyed this Keeping IT Real episode, and thank you for listening. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. This podcast is all about celebrating and connecting professional heroes who work hard at IT every day. To continue the conversation and learn how VCOM can help you better buy, manage, and pay for your technology, visit us at vcomsolutions.com. Until next time.